Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order once again and ask councillors to please turn their electronic devices to silent vibrate mode and ensure that they are properly signed into the system. First of all, I will ask Councillor Bellows for the land acknowledgement statement. I believe she has it. It'll be on the screen in just a moment, and Councillor Bellows will read it for us.
You started, Jim.
So, Councillor Bellows will be providing us with the land acknowledgement statement.
We begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living in Niagara is directly related to the resources and friendship of the Indigenous people.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
And we will now have our moment of silence. Would you please rise for the moment of silence, please? Thank you. Please remain standing for the singing of O Canada. Councillor Greenwood, please start us off.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love, in all of us common, with glowing hearts we see thee rise, a true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land, glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you. I want to commend members of council for their fine voices wonderful rendition of our national anthem. Are there any items to be added to the agenda? I'll call on Councillor Zalepa to add correspondence item CLC 19-2019 to the agenda under correspondence for consideration and further additions to the agenda. Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd just like to add the memorandum, as you mentioned, CLC 19-2019 to the agenda.
Thank you. Are there any changes to the order of items on the agenda? I see none. Okay, I better go down here. The no amendments, so we're, oh yes, okay. I'll ask for a mover and seconder to adopt the agenda as amended by our good friend, Councillor Zalepa. Councillor Kiokio, and shall I say, our good friend, the Mayor of Thorold himself, Ugolini, Mayor Ugolini. All in favor? Thank you, it's carried. Disclosures of pecuniary interest. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? I see none. There are no presentations scheduled this evening. Under the Chair's reports, announcements, and remarks, in the interest of brevity this evening and moving the agenda along, I will forego that opportunity. I heard a round of applause coming there. Under delegations, there are no delegations. So now we go to council minutes. You will see those on your agenda under item 10.1, 10.2, 10.3, 10.4. All of the above minutes are presented for errors and omissions only. I'll call on Councillor Dart for the motion to adopt the minutes.
So I have a resolution moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Steele, that the following minutes of Regional Council be adopted. Open and closed sessions minutes CL2 2019, January 17, 2019. Open session minutes CL3 2019, January 17, 2019. Open and closed session minutes CL4 2019, February 14th, 2019, and open session minutes CL5 2019, February 14, 2019.
Any discussion? If not, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Our next item is correspondence, as you'll see before you. 11.1.1, 11.1.2, 11.1.3. I'll call on Councillor Encina for the motion.
Thank you, Chair. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Steele. The items to be received, referred to be dealt with by this council through the agenda and through addendum.
Thank you. Any discussion? If not, I'll call the question. Oh, sorry, Councillor Encina.
I think I'm in the right spot with 11.2.1. Sorry, wrong one. I'll wait. Sorry. I apologize.
I think that comes up next, I think, so.
Yep.
I'll call the question in. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Now for consideration, we have 11.2 for consideration, which is a request to establish the hybrid model implementation plan, joint task force. I'll call on Councillor Easton for the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Moved by myself and Councillor Betty DeSaris that a joint task force be established in order to provide oversight into the hybrid model implementation plan development processes directed by Council regarding the alternative service delivery review of social housing, and that the terms of reference for this task force outlined under Appendix 1 of this report be approved. that 2 representatives from Regional Council who are not members of the Niagara Regional Housing Board be appointed to the Joint Task Force, that staff be directed to request 2 representatives from the Niagara Regional Housing Board for membership on the task force, and that the task force be disbanded once the hybrid model implementation plan is brought forward and considered by council.
Thank you. Any discussion? Councillor Encina. And I think if you sign in with your name here, we haven't said, Councillor Encina, I saw a hand. Councillor Greenwood, I think, had her hand there.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to this, the Alternative Service Delivery Review, the third of its kind, to look at Niagara Regional Housing, I believe should come to an end and we move on. How many times as we've gone through, how many times have we gone through the review of policies and procedures, workings of Niagara Regional Housing before we say enough time spent? We spent umpteen years. It's been done 3 times so far. We see that the provincial government is now working towards changes to the planning and to access to affordable housing. Prior to making any changes, I would suggest that we hold off and see what's coming down the pipe in the very near future. The Ernst & Young report made several recommendations during their review. Many of these recommendations were already being implemented. Land banking is currently being done. Partnerships with developers and other nonprofit organizations, you only have to look to Welland and Niagara Falls for that. End of operating agreements between contractors is now being addressed, and they're looking at how to continue. Rather than focus efforts and energies on housing, rather than focus the energies of staff on housing, they've had to deal with alternative service delivery hanging over their heads. It should be noted that by moving responsibilities from Niagara Regional Housing to community services, as they stated, will have no effect on wait times. It's unclear how it would change, if anything at all. Housing is related to the environment, as the conditions of the environment. So moving from one responsibility to another, is it going to change anything? Is it going to, the wait time is going to get shorter? No. The report seems to lump homelessness and housing and social assistance all in one. I beg to differ. I would suggest that they all have to be separate. They are in a continuum, but they need to be dressed a little differently. There is a claim that there is no cost associated to going ahead with the ASD. I beg to differ. The time lost for staffing to prepare for ASD meetings, preparing reports, and person hours lost. I would suggest that the person hours spent on the ASD would be astronomical, and we continue to waste valuable time on this. Time should have been spent advancing department programs. As you look through the report, I believe the problem revolves around communication between the NRH and community services. It is my belief, after going through many documents, that a memorandum of understanding, if a memorandum of understanding were drafted and implemented, then there would be no need to waste any more time. As we see now, the request is to have a steering committee move this forward. We need to end this bureaucratic, I call it shuffle, and get down to business. If the time spent on housing was equal to that of the time involved in the ASD, I would think that we would be further ahead and wait times for affordable housing would be much lower. I am hoping that Council will agree that the time for more meetings and non-action on affordable housing is over. We don't need more meetings. We need an MOU to get rid of the barriers to move on. I would like to make a motion that Council direct staff to abandon the ASD process, restructuring, and for the legal department to draft a memorandum of understanding that would allow sharing of information between Niagara Regional Housing and the appropriate departments in the Niagara region, namely Community Services. I've gone through many documents, and everything revolves around communication, privacy issues. If an MOU can be drafted that removes that hindrance, I don't think we need to restructure everything again. And again, this is the third time they've gone through this. Personally, it's a waste of time. First time, okay. Second time, yes. Third time, it's a witch hunt. That's my own personal belief. So, like I say, I'm putting that forward as a motion.
Councillor Greenwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have to listen to Councillor Encina. I was ready to put a motion on the floor to recommend someone for that, but I can hold off on that depending on the motion that Councillor Encina has put on the floor.
Chair, point of order. Is there a seconder?
Sorry, Councillor.
Is there a seconder to the amendment?
I didn't. Councillor Dart has seconded, but there's a motion already on the floor, and this is contrary to the motion on the floor. So we would have to deal, I'm informed by the clerk, we would deal with the motion on the floor first. If it's defeated, then we would deal with Councillor Encina's motion. Sorry, Councillor Greenwood, would you repeat your presentation, please, your comments?
I was just listening to Councillor Encina, and I was prepared to put a motion on the floor to recommend Councillor Rigby as one of the persons that you were going to designate from that weren't a part of Niagara Regional Housing or on the board to be on that committee.
I believe that, and the clerk will correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that we will first of all vote on the motion and then vote on.
Well, that's correct. I was just answering because my name came up.
And
Okay.
then we would vote on the names. Should the motion be approved, we would then vote on the two names.
Sure, absolutely.
Or the names to be chosen. Any other discussion? Councillor Edgar.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, Chair, to staff. In the presentation that we received last year, I believe it was, and we went through quite a bit of discussion and angst over this alternative service delivery. And I remember that there were going to be potential savings in money as well as in time and effort by going ahead with this recommendation. And I was wondering if we could have a little update from Commissioner Jugley for the new council members here that we're not around to benefit from her knowledge, her intimate knowledge of this issue.
Yes.
Thank you for the question through the chair. As some members of council may recall, we did a presentation on this issue both in July and then again further discussion in October. But in the July meeting, a fairly substantial presentation was made about the recommendations, why the consultant made the recommendations, and the kind of outcomes that were hoped for with a model change. The outcomes were actually mostly focused on improved service for clients. It was not proposed that it would have any substantial cost savings. It was, in my opinion, more cost neutral. It might have a little bit of cost savings, but that certainly wasn't its objective. The objective of the model change is actually consistent with model changes in the housing realm across the province. So the recommendations by Ernst & Young were not particularly surprising in that model or models that actually fully integrate housing services into the larger organization are pretty consistent across the 46 service managers across the province. The focus on human services integration is a recognition that people who are approaching the municipality for income-tested programs often are coming with very similar situations, similar needs, and certainly are having to provide similar information. So for example, about 80% of the information that is collected when you apply for social assistance, fee subsidy, even some homelessness services, and affordable housing or rent subsidy are exactly the same, 80% of the information. So across the province, it is not unusual to see efforts to try to integrate those processes that intake clients into income-tested programs. So that's not unusual. In terms of the information sharing, unfortunately, information sharing is not that easy. Municipalities have discovered that in many cases you cannot simply provide access to provincial databases through memorandums of understanding. I think that we all would agree, and those of us that are in the healthcare world as well, that this creates often huge obstacles that clients have to struggle with when they have to tell their story over and over again to many different organizations. So that's part of it. The other elements of the recommendation are around integrating your efforts in planning and funding of the service system, whether it's housing providers, homelessness service providers, or others. There are very similar kinds of approaches to that kind of work, as well as integrating the other activities related to planning for affordable housing, such as land policy, financial work that happens with tax programs, incentives, and so on. So these are the things that are common behind a recommendation of integrating your efforts between your other areas of service manager responsibility. In terms of the relationship to homelessness, actually coordinated access between the homelessness system and housing system is a recommendation both by the federal government and the provincial government. And while I would absolutely agree that the kind of needs of some of our more chronically homeless people are quite distinct from many of the kinds of people that are presenting for, let's say, public or social housing, we actually are seeing thousands of people that approach the homelessness system for other kinds of support who use both sectors. So the crossover is actually more common than you might think. Right now, Niagara Regional Housing on its wait list has on its records 950 people who indicate that they are homeless. I don't know who those people are because I actually cannot tell whether they're the same people that are in our homeless system or a different group of people. So there actually is fairly significant overlap between the two. Similarly, we provide services and community services for seniors, outreach services that support people in their housing, not necessarily in Niagara Regional Housing, but certainly we have many opportunities to work together. Now, I will actually agree with Councillor Encina in that there has been a great deal of work and a great deal of discussion on this issue. And I know that when I look to my colleague across the way, we would very much like to come to some kind of conclusion. We don't disagree with that sentiment at all. It has created a great deal of disruption, certainly for both of our staffs, as we try to navigate the decision of moving forward. So I do absolutely understand the sentiment behind those concerns, but I would also say that the rationale behind them are consistent with the similar kinds of recommendations that are made in this sector across the province.
Thank you, Councillor Edgar.
I would just wanted to give my thanks to the commissioner because I know that she's passionate about this and she has this intimate knowledge, and I could not have done the job of bringing this forward as well as she could. So thank you very much.
I have Councillor Easton next.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to support the comments made by the Commissioner. Sometimes there are programs that we become vested in that it's difficult for us to give up what becomes very dear to us. And there's no question about it, Niagara Regional Housing is viewed by many as a very unique and specialized service, and that there is not, and it's something that shouldn't be touched. The committee that looked at the alternate service delivery was not of that opinion. And in fact, I think one of the most compelling arguments that came forward to us was really around a young mother who had children, wanted to go back to school, could not achieve permanent housing, but she was able to get wraparound services through some manipulation of the system so that she could continue to go to school, so that her children would receive childcare with the hope that when housing, permanent housing was available, that she would be in a much, much better place. Otherwise, she would just be standing in place and waiting. And that kind of situation and those types of people were of real concern for us. So while it does make a change, no question about it, and this change has not come easily, and that's the reason why it's the third time around, the strengths of community services are to provide those strong wraparound services to everyone that falls into the category of requiring housing, as well as a lot of other social services. But the strength of Niagara Regional Housing is definitely in the housing stock and the management of the housing stock, including the general condition of those properties. So I believe that we should be moving forward to finish this up with some haste, Councillor Insinia, and I believe that it will be in the best interest of our community for us to do that once and for all. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I realize it's not part of this argument or this discussion. However, we still don't have a comprehensive housing policy in the Niagara region, and that would certainly be something that would need to be put in place for any policy, regardless of what it is, to be really effective.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Butters.
Thank you, Chair Bradley. I have a question, and I guess through you to Adrian, I suppose. Was there ever consideration given for a full integration of Niagara Regional Housing and Community Services? My short time on the board, I've seen a really good working relationship between the two entities. And I just wondered if you could comment on that. And as well, can you kind of put it in a nutshell, what exactly is it we're trying to fix?
Commissioner.
So through the chair, both really excellent questions. So in terms of the fully integrated model, it's interesting you asked that. So the consultants did actually consider a fully integrated model. And when you look at some of the housing areas across the province, many have moved to a fully integrated model. The reasons for that vary. Often there is some thought that when you bring in the real estate portion of the work, that there are some opportunities to integrate it with your larger facilities department or service, where you have sort of a critical mass again of buying power, of project management power. It wasn't recommended, partly because Niagara Regional Housing does a good job with the facilities they have. And I would suggest, and I actually share this thinking with my Niagara Regional Housing friends, that managing apartments and building apartments and all of the things that go with that are very different than managing municipal facilities and assets. And so one of the, I think, hesitations to fully integrate was because of that distinction in the work. Now, there are municipalities that have, and they see some opportunities through doing that, but that was not recommended by the consultant at the time. The things that were recommended that would be addressed by this was to improve a number of things. The offerings to clients who are on the wait list. So this is a client group that we sometimes, and I would never suggest Niagara Regional Housing forgets them, because they don't, but it is a group of people whose only service is to go on a list, and there they sit. And so the expectation across the province is to actually do a bit more with people when they're applying for housing, to see if they can be diverted to other kinds of options, assisted in the interim, maybe provided other services at the same time, to make sure that they have other resources that they might need. I gave the example of the 950 people who are homeless on the list. What are we doing for those people while they wait? So that's a question. And again, Niagara Regional Housing is not at fault in any way for how they manage the list, because Their responsibility is not to address homelessness. Their responsibility is to address people who are applying for rent geared to income housing. And they do a good job of managing that process. They also have a huge responsibility of managing the rules, and there are many rules so that we know how people are accessing housing. The province is aware that in our income-tested programs, we are overly bound to rules, and we've lost sight of the people we serve. They've challenged the municipalities to look at ways to integrate the services that we deliver so we do better with these people as they approach us for service. Similarly, they're asking us to look at the people who are now in our social housing stock, and not just Niagara Regional Housing stock, but our provider stock, and looking at the services there. There was a very thorough review by the Auditor General a couple of years ago that looked at our housing programs in Ontario, and we're very concerned that people come into social housing and they never leave. And we actually have, part of our waitlist challenges, there's an entrance, but there's no exit. There are provinces around this country that offer additional services to people who are in our social housing stock that help people find employment, other services, so they can actually improve their circumstances and move out. So part of the model that we're being asked to consider is looking for ways to actually help people while they're in housing and to move on. The other is to offer broader services. So across the community service sector, particularly social assistance and childcare and homelessness, we're being asked to connect people with other services like mental health services. So those things are also considered in a strategy of integration. This is, again, not to say that Niagara Regional Housing has been doing anything wrong. And I want to emphasize that that's not what we're trying to do. We're not saying that they're broken. What we're saying is that they do not have the connections that would allow them to actually make those next steps without more integration of those services. So it's to add services. The other comment from Councillor Easton, I think it's a very important one in terms of coordinated planning. So if you think about what our planning friends, and I look, my colleague down here, have a mandate to look at affordable housing within the official plan. I have a mandate within the 10-year Housing and Homelessness Action Plan to look at affordable housing. My homelessness providers are on me saying the reason we can't get people out, because most of the people that are coming into our stock actually could be housed if we found something, is because there's no stock. So the coordination of planning efforts across the municipality is also an expectation. That means the coordination of investment. How do we invest strategically to look at maximizing, maybe it's our incentive programs. I know that will be something that will be discussed here in the future. It will be things in terms of our DC policies, our tax policies, how we plan our land, how we work with our local area municipalities. And also, while I'm looking at investments in things like supportive housing, how do I coordinate those efforts with those larger projects? So those are the things that we're trying to improve. I would hesitate to use the word fix. The things we're trying to improve with an integrated model for the service manager functions of housing. Does that make sense? It's complicated.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councillor Butters. Thank you. Councillor Rigby.
Oops. I almost pulled my coffee over there. Thank you. We have two departments, if you will, within the region. Both are outstanding, and one is community services, and the other is Niagara Housing. And both those staffs want this over. And I agree with, let's get it done and get it over with. My concern, though, having sat on the housing off and on over the past 8 or 10 years, and also working on K and working with the homeless issues, is that there is a synergy between the two that really needs to continue. And what I'm concerned with the potential, if we don't go ahead with this movement, this motion we have in front of us, and we go to what Councillor Encina is suggesting, is that some of the really good things that have been come to fruition and within this joint task force suggestion might be lost because we might back out of most of those positives that we have directed. I don't think that's the intention at all in Councillor Encina's motion. But it does back off some of the things that are already been worked on. I have to tell you, the previous council at the beginning was fully geared to try and eliminate as many other organizations that they could and try to centralize everything in one place because we'll save money. And that's proven once again, it doesn't work always that way. And so I think you need to consider both when you're making a decision on this one. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Villala.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Jugley, just a quick question. First, I want to say I'm a firm believer that homelessness and housing are two very distinct, there's differences between the two. So I don't see that working as well as, I'm sorry, as well as I'd like it to. I'd like to certainly investigate it much further. I hope I'm able to sit on that task force if possible. But my question to you is about the appeals board, because I find that that is a very intricate part of the housing network. And I do sit on the appeals board, and it's a very important function. So how do you see that working? Would that be still at Niagara Regional Housing, or would it be brought over to Community Services? And I would hope that it would be a continued process.
Commissioner.
So through the chair, I don't want to presume the outcome of the plan. I know that the staff currently are looking at all models. Typically, it would stay with the provider. So Niagara Regional Housing has substantial housing stock. They do a really good job with their tenants. If there's a situation, particularly an eviction, there's an appeal process, and typically that would be managed by the provider, in this case Niagara Regional Housing, and so that process would continue. I think that there are more nuances to the appeal responsibilities for the service manager, and so we would be looking at those within the hybrid model that we would be preparing an implementation plan for.
Thank you.
Does that satisfy you, Councillor Villala?
Very much so, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any others? Councillor Encina?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just requesting that I can talk to this motion, as I thought when I first made mine that I would be able to talk to that motion and not this. I thought mine would have come first. So
I think members of council would agree to that. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Just a couple things. Hearing the director, hearing some of those that were here last council, you all came to the same conclusion of communication. Everybody centered around the same thing. We need to get information from here. We have to get information from here. And we can't do that because there's barriers. This person could have gone into this program, but we weren't allowed to share with that person over here. Well, again, and that's the reason why I'm saying, if we eliminated the barriers, I'm not saying that we're going to pull back from what Ernst & Young had said, because a lot of the things that they recommended, they're doing already. So where you say is there's going to be a pullback, possibly, but I think what you're going to see is an enhanced on both sides. So I really do believe that if we developed a memorandum of understanding where someone comes in who wants to move up the ladder, get into the housing market, or get into housing per se, and perhaps might be on a program, that information can be shared with Niagara Regional Housing. So we can work together to do that. The other thing, I am one of these people who likes to cut through the red tape. This has been going on for 10 years. So it's been reviewed, it's been reviewed again, and now it's been reviewed again, this time from 2015. I would think, in all earnest, that enough is enough. How long are we going to study this for? So if we have an implementation team that comes forward, from council and everybody else that gets involved, you know what? Time's wasting. I looked at affordable housing and we saw the number of people that were on the waiting lists. It's not getting any shorter. We, as part of the Niagara Regional Housing Board, we're taking steps right now to go out and talk to all the municipalities and push things forward because things sat dormant. Everybody was worried about their job. They had ASD hanging over their heads, so they really couldn't do too much. As per se, what council had last term, what they thought about it, and what they did, this was the last thing they did before they were, it was concluded. It was October 14th, I believe. So I just ask that you think about it, get rid of the red tape. Legal team put together an MOU that would encompass both agencies. Niagara Regional Housing is the model, one of the models in the province that everybody looks to right now for the job they do. How do you beat that? So I would just ask, through you, Chair, that I would ask that you defeat this and we move on to another motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I have no other speakers listed, so I will be calling the question that you see before us, which is the motion which has been proposed by Councillor Easton. All in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Now we have the names of the two individuals to be appointed. This is two representatives from the Niagara region who are not on the Housing Authority now. One has been proposed already. Councillor Greenwood has proposed Councillor Rigby. Any other nominations? Or if someone else wishes to be nominated, they should speak to the person next to them and have that person nominate them. Councillor Villella, did you? Okay, Councillor Bilsma.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Easton.
Councillor Easton's name has been put in. Any other? Councillor Zalepa?
I'll second that.
You're seconding it? Okay.
Sorry, pardon me.
So, Councillor Height.
I move the nomination be closed. Thank you. That's what I meant to say.
Does that require a seconder? No. Okay, all in favor of closing nominations? I think we have two councillors who have been named. We need a mover and seconder for the motion that Councillors Easton and Rigby be appointed to the Hybrid Model Implementation Plan Joint Task Force. And we'll have Councillor Steele and Councillor Gibson seconding it. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. The next motion, the next item we're dealing with is Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority Board appointments. I'll call on Councillor Bilsma for the motion.
Thank you very much. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor DeSaro. That correspondence item CLC 18-2019 respecting Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority Board appointments be received. And then I just wanted to add that the suggested motion included in the memo be presented with a duration of 3 months recommended.
Discussion. Councillor Gale.
Sorry, Chair, I pressed by mistake.
Okay, sorry. Then Councillor Edgar.
Thank you, Chair. I have an amendment by addition to that motion.
Presented.
I move my amendment that the motion to extend the tenure of the interim board of directors be contingent upon A, the board of directors of the NPCA determining the types of skills and or experience required on this board of directors based on the mandate of the NPCA, and subsequently providing a skills matrix for purposes of selecting these members to the region before the end of March 2019. B, staff being directed to develop a process that all lower tier municipalities can follow to determine who they will recommend as their representatives to the NPCA Board of Directors before the end of March 2019. And C, staff being directed to develop a process that will determine a fair and acceptable mix of politicians to be responsible to Niagara taxpayers to serve on the NPCA Board of Directors, alongside those chosen by the skills matrix, also before the end of March 2019. And may I speak to the motion now, to my amendment?
Yes.
I'm sorry, that's true, I need a seconder.
A seconder is going to be Councillor Hyde, apparently. He has put up his hand, he seconded it, and you're now going to speak to your amendment.
Thank you. I think that one thing that we've lost sight of here is it's one thing to decide that we need nothing but citizens with various skills on the board of directors, but we also need to know that where we're getting them from, what skills we need, who's going to fill those positions, and also we also have to consider that we are using taxpayers' dollars, and that elected officials need to be responsible and accountable for those dollars. So this is basically a method of forming our part of the board of directors of the NPCA. Thank you.
Speaking to the amendment. Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor DeZero? Oh, if you will punch your name in, we'll do it. Oh, I would recognize you now, so Councillor DeZero, and then Councillor Bilsma Hyde after that.
I just have a couple of questions to the mover of the motion, if I may. Thank you for your motion. I just wonder, what about...
Point of order, Chair. We need to speak to the amendment. We can't speak to the main motion until the amendment is dealt with.
I think what the member is asking only a question for clarification.
For your, to the amendment, yes, that you were making.
I'm sorry, you said the motion. I thought you meant the main motion, not the amendment.
Sorry.
I apologize.
Councillor DeZero is speaking to the amendment.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, to the amendment. I guess a question just for clarification, what would you anticipate happening with the people that have already been appointed by local municipal governments? How would you deal with that?
That would be up to the municipal governments, I would imagine. We don't have I don't believe that we have had a number of names submitted yet, maybe one or two, I'm not sure.
Okay.
But all I'm doing is going by what the report from the Auditor General said, and it's important that we do have a skills matrix, and up until this point we haven't developed one. We don't know what we need or who we need on this board, and that's, I think, of paramount interest.
Okay, and I guess the only other question that I have for you through the chair is how would you determine which municipalities would send politicians versus citizens?
That's item number 3 on my amendment, which is the staff be directed to develop a process that will determine a fair and acceptable mix of politicians. In other words, who's coming from where and how that's going to be sorted out.
Okay. I don't have any other questions.
Thank you. I have Councillor Bilsma next.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate and welcome the amendment. I had something similar also drafted in my head that we put a timeline on it, and I'd just like to say to the entire council through you that there is ongoing work towards this effect. Now, the only difference that I had in mind that Councillor Edgar had put forward was an April timeline. So we'd be reporting to all of the municipalities, participating municipalities, in an April timeframe. That would allow them a full month to consider and draft something that could come into the May council meetings, or the May council meetings of the participating municipalities, so that it would come to effect prior to a 3-month extension, which would fall on or about June 6th. So that was a little bit of the timing that we had with respect to dealing with the number and the composition. So there's two kind of aspects there. So with respect to, so I welcome the amendment, and I thought it was just appropriate to just give us that one more month because of the, just the work that's still involved yet.
Councillor Edgar, on the suggestion.
Different timeframes were looked at, and we worked back from the date of June as to when would be appropriate so that we could get this done and get moving as soon as possible. The end of March, that gives a month to put all of this into place, and I, for one, would rather not wait if we don't have to.
Yes.
Thank you, through your chair, and I just kind of echo the comments from Councillor Bilesma. I'm looking for some consideration on the timing, because if I understand how this is written, they're looking for feedback from the board by the end of March, but also a solution from staff by the end of March, and sequentially that doesn't work in my mind. We sort of a catch-22, we need to deal with the composition. I could read this motion and assume that we're going with 12 nominees, one from each local municipality, but that's yet to be determined. So if we allow the discussion to take place, but if perhaps the number one could stay at March in terms of feedback on the skills base, but the 2 and 3 could either be a subsequent month or further, depending on how the sequence works with the expectations that Councillor Bilesma directed. Not interested in dragging this out, just looking logistically at how we can actually achieve it.
Councillor Edgar.
I would accept that as, although I don't like friendly amendments, I will accept a friendly amendment at this time to read the end of April 2019. If that would suit staff, then so be it.
Thank you. I have Councillor Height.
Yes, I second it. It's the first time I've seen it, but we've had some discussion about it. It's critical to have a good mix on the NPCA. So having 100% of them politicians, we know didn't work the last term. And I don't believe having 100% non-politicians makes a lot of sense either. Councillor from Niagara Lake brought up an interesting point, is how are we going to select them? Well, one of the things that I think is very critical is the matrix and resumes should come in front of council, because we make the decision, and through the staff to our clerk, do we not determine who's on the Conservation Authority, not the municipalities? Is that not the way it's done, even though they make a recommendation? How does it work exactly?
Clerk.
Through you, Chair, the way that it works is that the appointment first comes to regional council for consideration. If there isn't a regional councillor from that municipality that wishes to be on the board, it goes back to the local municipality to decide how they want to fill that vacancy. So
As we just heard that, so when we reach out to the 12 municipalities and say, bring forward a recommendation, I don't think 31 of us have said we won't sit on the Conservation Authority yet. So what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Do they bring forward 12 recommendations and then we have to take the 12 recommendations? Or do we have to determine who wants to sit on the board first and then go to the communities? Because I don't want to make this too messy, but I believe we make the final decision here, and therefore after we see the resumes and the matrix filled in and the recommendations, then if I want to ignore Mr. Smith, who I believe the City of St. Catharines has just brought forward, and say, I want to be there instead of Mr. Smith, and I don't, but if I did, then I could say no to him and unfortunately upset the gentleman, because I think I want to be there. So we need to have that figured out first before we get too far into this, because otherwise we're going to upset a whole bunch of people in our citizenship when we go out and we get 32 people saying yes, and then one of us stands up and say, no, I want to be there. So we have to be clear on how this works. And I believe we make that final decision. So I don't believe we have to tell them yet. And I believe we will probably upset and I'm using the 6-6 idea, 6 representatives and 6 counselors, that we're gonna upset 6 communities that we don't choose, at least if it's up to me, that's what I would recommend. We're gonna upset 6 communities that we haven't chosen their representatives. Sorry, maybe 5, because I would select Mr. Smith to represent me any day. So we need clarification for sure before we go much further, I think.
Thank you. Next speaker is Councillor Yip.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Actually, my apologies. I thought I was going to make an amendment to the amendment, but maybe with my colleague's indulgence, if the clerk could assist on this. Because I was originally going to suggest that the municipalities who have already appointed citizens, those individuals take their seats on the board. We extend the rest of them until March 28th, at which time recommendations come forth from the municipalities, whether they be councillors or citizens, right? With respect to my colleagues, we didn't appoint 12 councillors because we thought they were more qualified or capable. It was the urgency of the matter to replace the previous board, right? So.
Acting CAO.
Through you, Chair, I believe that direction speaks to the main motion, not the amendment. The main motion comes into play is subject to this.
Councillor Rigby.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Councillor Height brought up most of what I was concerned with. And I think we have to remember back to December, and we appointed 12 people. And those 12 people were, originally we were talking about 6 months, and it was decided we better go to 3, which was what we're dealing with. And those people have a month left, and probably a lot of them are saying good. And I think they've done an incredibly good job. The idea was, partially was, in fact, to do exactly what I think, I'm not even clear what the amendment is, or what the main motion is that we're dealing with, if all of that is the amendment. So if I look at my laptop here, it says, or my iPad, it has 3 letters from 3 different municipalities, but I can't find where there is a recommendation here. So, but if this is the motion, it falls right in place with what we were attempting to do back in December, is appoint 12 members for 3 months, and in that time, figure out how we can get a balanced board out of what we do. And what Councillor Height brings forward is we've certainly the last 2 or 3 councils that I've been on, the region is the one that goes ahead and appoints those people to the Conservation Authority. And this, quite often the city will recommend somebody, but we didn't always take that recommendation. I know Thorold always recommended one individual citizen, a good man too, should have recommended him again. Okay. But, and he was the only citizen we had on the Conservation Authority, which was wrong. And I was going to want to see Mr. Smith on this board too, but I think he's going to have to wait, and we'll see how this goes. But that's the challenge that's put forward. So I don't disagree with what the motion is. And part of what might be is to how to work out how we make sure that we have each one of our 12 municipalities represented in some capacity on that board as well.
CAO.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, just for clarity for the group, and this is the way I understand it, so I'll look to the mover of the amendment. All you see before you right now is the amendment, but the way it was put forward, at least what I heard, was that the main motion would be contingent upon these steps being approved first.
Oh.
Correct?
That's correct. This was my way of putting forward what you just spent your time saying we needed.
Yeah.
And the same with Councillor Height saying the same thing. This is trying to figure out how we're going to do that.
Councillor Easton.
Mr. Chairman, there's another matter here, and that is the speed with which municipalities can turn around an advertising and an interview process depending on people's availability. So I think that the end of April is too soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Greenwood.
Mr. Chair, if I can remember correctly, this goes through you. Back in 2006, when I was appointed to the Conservation Authority, it said on the list, like for the Police Services Board and all those ones, the housing, it said up to 8 councillors from the region could be appointed at that time. And each one of us, like if myself and Councillor Nicholson had our names in for us, we'd have to decide which ones we want, because you couldn't have 2 people from the same municipality. We'd pick the 8, and then the municipalities would pick the other 4. And then Councillor Butters came in from Port Colborne. Councillor Henderson, who was a regional councillor, was representing Wainfleet. And Stecky from Fort Erie, Bob Stecky, he represented Fort Erie. I remember these specifically. So we had a diverse group at that time. There was never anything on that list that said up to 12 regional councillors could be represented from the Niagara region, not at all. So I just wanted to have that made clear. And that's how we did it back in 2006.
CAO.
Through you, Chair, while that, in fact, I recall that I was in Fort Erie, may have been true how it happened at that time, this council doesn't have a documented process that prescribes that that's how it happens.
Councillor Bellows.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, and I agree a lot of what Councillor Edgar has said here. However, the first month that these 12 councillors were appointed, there was the courts, there was so much hurricane going on as far as I'm concerned. I don't really believe that it's fair. They've really only had 2 months. I myself would like to give them extra time, but I'd also like to know how many of the municipalities have already picked their person, and are these people supposed to just wait? See, I heard 5 today, so that's why I'm asking.
There's just 3 in the report. Someone have an answer to the question of Councillor Bellows? I think the clerk has.
Through you, Chair, we have received correspondence from 3 municipalities appointing representatives.
Okay, thank you. So I think we've got 1 kick at the can to get it right, and a couple extra months, as far as I'm concerned, just till everything gets figured out, won't hurt anybody. So I agree with the amendments. I just don't agree with the timelines, and I'd like to see the 12 finish what they were doing, no more than an additional 3 months. Like, that's what I'd like to put the time limit on.
Councillor Encina.
Thank you, Chair. I too, like Councillor Height, am looking forward to moving on. But what the March 2019 timeline is short. We have gone there. A lot has happened. A lot has transpired. We didn't realize the kind of things we were going to encounter. Unfortunately, we couldn't get to this part of what we wanted to do. So to actually throw this in right now, in the mix of everything else that's going on right now, I would think would be a bit unfair. If we stretch that out to the end of April, I believe that could be done. I don't see a problem with that, as perhaps staff would be able to do the same thing. But for the March 2019, it's really tough. I can't remember, I've never gone to so many more meetings at the NPCA just to get through everything. And we haven't even been able to touch this yet, and that's the problem that we've been facing. That's why I'm suggesting perhaps we can move it to the end of March.
Councillor Kiokio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also sit on the committee, and I know that I think it's important. I know some communities right now do have people ready to go, and I think it's important for the ones that do, they get involved right away. I'm one of them. I know our community well and is prepared to put someone in my place. For myself, I think we've done a great job to this point. The NPCA is well on its way now. I like the direction it's taken. I feel very comfortable with the direction it's going right now. And for myself, I've been looking at, we're reviewing the governance, we're selecting CAO, but I also think it's important for the three maybe municipalities that do have people ready to go, that get them involved. You know, I'd be more than happy to step aside, get the people involved and have them involved in those decisions on governance and the selection of CEO. I think it's important that they do get involved. As for who sits on the committee, the counselors, I think it's fair to say that maybe we should have 50-50. I know talking to, not sure, when we had our orientation, we spoke with a few people through that process, and they said that most NPCAs do have 50-50, 50% counselors, 50, no, am I mistaken? I thought it was 50-50, but anyhow, I do see that, you know, some councils on the board, along with people from the community. So I'm prepared now to step aside and let the person that's, you know, that's qualified, create a balanced board, go moving forward, let them go and be part of the process as we move forward.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Campion.
Thanks, Chair. I just have one comment, and I don't want anybody to take this as an insult. But when we put the interim board in, I didn't anticipate we were sending in a SWAT team, but we were sending in a group of people to displace another group of people. And having said that, and I appreciate the comments from Councillor Kyokyo, you know, I think the sooner you get the board in, the faster they can move forward with their programs. And if there are councillors who are sitting there now who are going to get reappointed, why don't you do that with your municipalities, and so we can just move this forward. So I think the sooner that we get it done, the better, because then we have a board that has been chosen purposefully to take on that role. So I'm happy to make this move faster, and I appreciate Councillor Kyokyo's comments.
Acting CAO, comment.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I didn't realize a couple of names popped up, but speaking with the mover of the amendment, and I guess respectful of the comments from one of the board members, and certainly staff wants to make sure we get this right as well. But I'll let the mover actually speak to it, and the fact that we could consider April 2019 for the first and May 2019 for the latter two. The discussion about having the local municipalities, the three that have indicated they have a designated person, that would again be back with the main motion as opposed to with this amendment.
Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Chair. I strongly support Councillor Edgar's amendment. I think one thing that when it's referred back to staff, that staff should look at and consider is that the number of the number of people going in to represent that board in some way reflect the amount of watershed in each of the areas. I know for Wainfleet and West Lincoln has 25% of the watershed. So you may want to look at that and say, well, they should have a little bit more say than like Wainfleet has one, and I think West Lincoln has one. So I would like to see that. I'd also like to see the transition happen slowly. If you take 12 people, and there's some expertise being developed now, if you take 12 people out, and all of a sudden 12 people come back in, the handover may not be as smooth. Where if it happens in a natural format, where as a municipality is ready to put their person in, that person goes in, and it's carried along like that. I think that would be a great way to transition. So that's my comments.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If all of you hadn't noticed, we've been kind of busy the last 2 months dealing with things at the NPCA. And it's been what I would consider to be a struggle to get through a lot of the items that we've been trying to deal with. I sit on the governance committee. We've met once. We're going to be meeting several times over the course of the next 2 months in order to help us shape what it is that's going on from a governance point of view. I think the single biggest thing that was very positive is the interim CAO that's been hired and put in place. I think everybody within this room can sort of shake their heads and say, yes, that was a very good move. we're very excited about the strength that's coming in with that. I do like the suggestion that Mr. Tripp made concerning end of April and end of May for the other two. I had always thought from the very beginning of this process that it would take us at least until June to go and get these things figured out. And we got delayed for a month thanks to a whole bunch of craziness that was going on. So I would ask that we have a little indulgence from council. I think you should trust us as we're going through this. Give us the time to get us to the right stage. All of us on the committee to a T are in the same boat as everyone else. We want to get this thing working right. We want to have the right mix. So anyway, my suggestion is we change that to the date suggested by Mr. Tripp.
I'm okay with,
Councillor,
I'm okay with that.
Councillor Edgar has said he would accept that change to his amendment. Councillor Whalen.
Mr. Chair, Councillor Foster covered my items. Thank you. It's already covered.
Okay. Councillor Redekop.
Mr. Chair, if the municipalities don't get direction with respect to the process to determine who they will recommend till the end of May, that means we won't be appointing anybody until probably at least the end of June, which means that the current councillors appointed to this board are going to need at least until the end of June, maybe July, which takes us, how many months is that? This is what, February, March, April, May, June, maybe another 5 months. So, I mean, it's starting to become very protracted. On the one hand, I think they've done a remarkable job. They have covered a lot of territory, and I commend them for that. And I think it was necessary for them to all be regional councillors so that they could at least feel the pressure of their colleagues here to keep moving these things forward. But I think that that starts to stretch this out far too long, and I won't support these dates.
Thank you. Councillor Hewson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm going to make a suggestion as a compromise. We know that we could put up to 26 members on the board. I think we all agreed that that was ridiculous. But we know that there are citizen appointments who have been put forward. And I personally think it's unfair to be cutting into their time. So why not, knowing that there's 2, 3, 4 appointments sitting on the table, why don't we just simply add them to the roster? That's my question. Can we do that?
Acting CAO, do you have a comment on that?
Through you, Chair, if I need to understand the suggestion is that in addition to the 12 that currently are on the board, I suspect that'll be problematic with our partner municipalities, and it isn't consistent with the order that was put forward by Judge Ramsey. So I think we might be creating other problems while I recognize the reasons to do it. Again, back to the main motion, if council wishes, they could look at the consideration of those 3 individuals that have been put forward as part of the 12. I'd suggest to council varying from the 12, and especially increasing it, is going to create problems with our partner municipalities and that we don't need at the moment.
Councillor Houston, did you have any further comment?
I was just going to point out that Hamilton actually doubled their numbers, and so did Haldeman. So knowing that they've made changes to their appointments, and if the number's reasonable, I don't see it being a problem, but I'll let it be up to the will of council or up to your decision.
Councillor Diodati.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I like the motion, I support it, and I support the amended dates. I think they're fair and they're reasonable. I think this group has done a very good job, and it's a big task in a short period of time. And you don't want to push them too far, too hard. Give them the time that they need to make good decisions. I like the idea of the skills-based matrix. Matter of fact, I'd like to see that on all of our boards, not just the NPCA, but every board that we have. The other problem with appointing anybody in advance, we have not yet determined the skills-based matrix. We don't know what skills we need to know which ones we're going to take. And the last thing is you can't have some communities picking their members before the rest of us, because that's not a level playing field. Give all the communities, all 12, the same opportunity to pick someone from their community. I happen to know we've got some great planners, some people, environmental experts that have great skills, but it isn't all about that either. It's about accounting experience, legal experience. There's all different aspects for board governance. So to do this right, I think Councilor Edgar is right on the money. We follow this timeline, then we go to our partner communities, then we roll out our nominees, and then we pick them based on their skills. I think that's the simple, sensible way to do this. It took a while to get into this mess. I've heard this said many times. Let's do it properly. Let's not rush it. Let's do it the right way to get out of it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Jordan.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to further that at Grimsby we have a person, and I don't know how that works with what terms of reference it's going to be for skill sets, but we have a person, and quite frankly, I'd be happy to give up my time there anytime soon, so thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. That sentiment has been expressed by a few people from time to time for some reason or other. So we're in a situation, it seems to me, we've had a lot of suggestions. We've got some disagreements, quite obviously, over more the timing than anything else. One of the suggestions that has come forward in this debate has been that the existing regional councillors be reappointed for a period of time, which Councillor Bilsma has suggested, and others have said that we could reappoint those individuals, and in the municipalities where municipality has chosen a new person rather than regional councillor, you might have them sitting on the board. Those seems to be the potential decisions that are there. I don't think anybody's suggesting that I've heard in the debate today that all regional councillors be terminated at this point in time. Nobody suggested that. On the other hand, there is some apprehension that we're delaying the new people coming on. So I don't know whether how we're going to end up with this particular motion, but it has now changed. If you will look at your screen, you will see that selecting those members of regional council, number 1 says before the end of April 2019. Number 2 talks about developing a process before the end of May of 2019. And number 3 says that staff be directed to develop a process to determine a fair and acceptable mix of politicians by the end of May 2019. This is not necessarily, I think we would agree as a council, going to be easy to do, because there may be some regional councillors who are going to want to stay on, and others who are happy to relinquish their position very quickly. And it'll be interesting to see who stays on and who doesn't stay on, and when we come down to the final decision. So that's what I've heard in the debate today. We do have a motion and amendment before us, and then the motion, and we'll vote on the amendment first, clerk, and then the motion as a whole. You have heard the debate. Anyone else wish to make a contribution? Councillor Dart.
Okay, so you've got, through you, Chair, so you've got some people, I think 3 maybe, that have already been, got the shoulder tap from their municipality. So I'm going to ask the question of the current board that are there, the interim current board. Is it wrong to allow these 3, I believe it's 3 individuals, to be sitting in, perhaps not a vote, but at least start to get their feet wet with this whole process as well too? I think if they've been, if they've put their name forward and prepared to volunteer their time, then I think they should be allowed to sit in on each of these meetings and hear what's going on as well. I know that the public can do that, but you might kind of want to feed them some information as well, the current interim board members too. But I like by the way, I do like this amendment.
I thought you were going to suggest that if any regional councillor in those municipalities that have chosen their member would like to relinquish the position and have themselves replaced. Thought you were going to suggest that, but you did not.
Gee, however, I
So,
might
no.
add, if
I'm not
anybody,
prompting you, George.
if anybody wants to relinquish, that's fine.
So go ahead. So I'm going to look to Councillor Bilsma to have a comment on this as the present chair of the NPCA.
So, when I had something exactly similar, and that's why I seconded the amendment. So I think it's the right process. I think what I might say of the board that are present is we've accomplished a phenomenal amount of stuff in 55 days in terms of rebuilding. There might be some doubt as whether we can complete our task by the end of the next extension. Let us determine that. We've done a remarkable amount of stuff, and we've had Miss Gilwood has come in. I can't express how much of a joy and a blessing it is to meet her tomorrow morning and get started. And I'm sure she'll have no short amount of information and advice that we can glean from that. So I think we can work within this time frame. I really do. It was the one that I had suggested myself. So I think that we can do this. We'll come up with a matrix, and then we will have a very fulsome discussion in about 2 months at this council again about the composition and the makeup. And so we can put that off till then, and then we'd be welcome to have all the new appointees, whoever they may be, regional councillors or citizen appointees. Just high level, and that was chairman's indulgent, I guess.
Thank you, Councillor Bilsma. So I'll ask the clerk. We do have a motion amended by Councillor Edgar. Do we have an amendment to an amendment, or? No. So we need to vote on this. There's no amendment to the amendment then has been put forward. Okay. Since there's no amendment to the amendment put forward, officially we will be voting on if no one else wishes to speak, if no one else wishes to speak, I hear a call for a vote to be taken. So did somebody request a recorded vote? A recorded vote has been requested.
The vote is open.
The motion is carried. Sorry, the amendment is carried. Thank you for that. And now we will vote on the full motion, I take it. It's being adjusted on your screens. It's on your screen, Councillor Height.
Yes, I'm trying to push the button and I can't get in.
Well, I think we're voting. No? Oh, okay, we're now on the main motion. All right, Councillor Height. Councillor Edgar.
It's done.
Thank you, Chair. I'm questioning whether 3 months is the appropriate time or not. I know that the interim CAO is coming. Her contract is 5 months. I'm wondering whether this addition or this extension should be longer than 3 months. I'm wondering whether we can get the work done with the new CAO in this short length of time.
Thank you. Is this a real list I have before me? I'm sounding like lady, is it Lady Macbeth or Macbeth? Is this a dagger which I see before me? Okay, we have an interesting list. Councillor Yip.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. We'll go back to my amendment that I was discussing earlier. So I suppose we have to look at the dates here. However, the amendment moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Campion is that Regional Council extend the appointments of Councillors Bylsma, Foster, Gibson, Greenwood, Hewson, Encina, Steele, and Zalepa, and that Regional Council immediately appoint the citizen appointees recommended by Fort Erie, Grimsby, St. Catharines, and Welland. Well, he stood up and said he had somebody.
I'll turn to the clerk and say, clerk, is that an order? It is an order. So the discussion now comes on the amendment.
Yes, on Councillor.
Okay, on the amendment.
Just need a seconder.
She has Councillor Campion.
Councillor Campion has seconded. Yes, thank you. Okay, Councillor Height.
I'm sure, as I'd love to relinquish my seat, there are a few things that need to be done. And unfortunately, I think the councillors who are there somewhat are needed back for a number of meetings. Number two, if we're going out to do a matrix, and I have nothing against the 3 or 4 people that have already coming forward from other communities, they aren't meeting the same requirements of the other 8. So if there's a matrix and we need to get a good mix of people, we aren't going to necessarily get a good mix of people if you're putting 3 or 4 people on tonight. I don't think it's realistic to do it tonight. And as much as I'd like to say goodbye, I don't think it's appropriate at this moment if we're going forward to the community saying, here's our matrix, and these people might not fit the matrix at all. So I won't support this amendment.
Councillor Redekop.
Well, I agree with those comments, and the other comment is, if we're going to have a mix of citizen appointees and regional councillors, and that's going to be based on recommendations from staff, which we don't have, how can we possibly appoint citizens now until we get all of the criteria?
Councillor Rigby.
I think enough's been said. Thank you.
Councillor Rigby thinks enough's been said, but I see Councillor Bylsma's name on the screen, so I'll call upon Councillor Bylsma.
Well, you know what, in pretty close. I just wanted to echo what Councillor Diodati had said. In order to be fair to everyone, at just a near future, we will have this fulsome discussion about who and how and the matrix and all of those kinds of things. So it should be fair to all the municipalities. And ultimately, you know, there are, we understand there's going to be a mix. So if everybody comes forward with a municipal appointee, this council will have to finesse the numbers anyways. And so if there's 12 citizen appointees and there's 6 and 6, we still need to figure out which 12 to pick, and it would be disadvantageous to the 12 that may be named from other municipalities at this point. So I echo what Councillor Diodati said. We're close, but just not yet.
Thank you. I was going to say I have no other, but I have Councillor Kiokio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So for the 3 municipalities that do have their people ready to go, are we saying to them that, no, you're going to have to go through the whole system again? Does the municipalities have to advertise again, have them go through a matrix? Is that what we're saying?
Councillor Bylsma nods his head no.
Even what Councillor Height stated earlier, says, well, it seems like they need to go through the same process, same matrix. So is that the route we're taking?
That's a legitimate question to be asked. I don't have the answer yet, but people are contemplating this. So Councillor Villela is going to speak.
Just quickly through you, Mr. Chair. Is anyone familiar with the Conservation Act? I'm not 100% familiar with it, but nor do I want to be. But that being said, I think it's somewhere in there that I had read when this all was coming about, that was it not up to the head of council, meaning of the city? No, that's not. You're shaking your head, Mayor Campion, no? I thought it went through a process that the mayor brought it to council. If nobody on council wanted that particular seat, that then it would go to appointing a citizen appointee if so wished. Not in those exact words, but I kind of think that's in the act. I could be wrong, and I'll look it up when I go home, but I just don't understand where we all fit into changing what the process was. Thank you.
CAO is going to offer comment, then I'll call on Councillor Campion.
Thank you, through you, Chair, and I look to Ms. Gibbs to support my answer, but the jurisdiction is with Regional Council first.
Councillor Campion.
I don't want to drag this on forever, Chair, but my understanding is through research at City Hall, the process that's been followed here has simply just been a process, this very unofficial process. You know, this council decided we're going to do it this way, and that's what they've been doing over the last couple of terms. Our indication is that the municipality has the ability to make the appointment, suggest it or forward it to this group to then send forward to the Conservation Authority. And so we have a motion of our council that dictates how we're going to do that, and we've actually done it. So my expectation is that that would be followed. So we're saying here right now that no, we're not going to do it. If I want to do it, our council wants to enforce our what we've done and push it forward here, I would expect that this council would take that recommendation. If they don't, and I have a willing partner here who then decides to resign, then what? So, you know, if Councillor Kiokio decides he's going to resign, and I'm not saying that he's going to, where are you going to get the body to fill that spot? You're going to ask me, or you're going to ask Councillor Villela. We both say no, then what? So we have a process in place. We've gone through the process. We expect that process to be followed. We want to move this forward quickly. We want to get, not quickly, so quickly, but we want to be able to have the board in place. It's going to be there for the next, 2 3/4 years instead of the next year and a half. If we keep delaying this, you're going to put a board in with 1 year left in their mandate. So the sooner it gets done, the better. We made a decision. I don't know what the other municipalities want to do. We want to move forward with ours. So that's my
Thank you, Councillor Campion. Councillor Whalen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in case this motion passed, Thorold doesn't have representative. Not that I want to stay there forever, but we don't have representation or an appointee on the list in Thorold. So I guess you probably want to add my name to the extension. Thank you. Thanks.
Is that okay with the mover? To add Councillor Whalen, I think that makes sense. Now, Councillor Nicholson.
Just through you, Chair, just a quick comment, and I think it was already been touched upon. We just voted on coming up with a skills matrix, and now we're appointing citizens to the board. Seems sort of contradictory. I think what the board needs is some continuity, and I think that's the reason why we're extending the current board. They're doing a lot of good work. They've only been there for a month and a half. What they need is some continuity, some time, and I think appointing some citizen appointees at this point in time, I think it goes against that, what the board needs, and it goes against what I think we just voted on, which was the skills matrix. So I'm against the second part of this motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ugolini, sorry.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I agree, and I agree with Mayor Diodati. We got to be fair across the board. We didn't put a person forward yet because we were waiting for the process. It's not that we don't have somebody that we want to put forward. So let's be fair to all the municipalities. And this motion as it reads now has 13 representatives. It doesn't have 12, so that needs to be corrected as well.
Councillor Zalepa.
I just further agree to that. I think it's not consistent with what we just did. Plus, like in Niagara, like a case like, so then our candidate would be subject to a higher bar, and it's not fair, so I won't support this amendment.
I have no further speakers, so we are calling the vote on what you see on the screen, that Regional Council extend the appointments of Councillors Bilsma, Foster, Gibson, Greenwood, Houston, Steele, Whalen, and Zalepa on the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority Board for the interim period, and the Regional Council immediately appoint the citizen appointees recommended by Fort Erie, St. Catharines, Welland, and Grimsby. That's the amendment that's before us. We have a recorded vote on that. Okay.
Vote is open.
The motion has been defeated. Sorry, the amendment has been defeated. Thank you for the prompting. So we now go back to the main motion, and there's a long list of, a potential list of speakers, which is starting with, I have Councillor Yip shown as, no? Okay, I see Councillor Height next.
Yes, sorry to prolong this, but I've got to stand and thank the chair and the vice chair, wherever she is, for the amount of work that they've done. We've been at a number of meetings, and as well as the people that are sitting on the committees, 5 or 6 meetings within a month and a half or 2 months. It's incredible how much work's gone on. And when Mayor Campion, Councillor Campion said he thought he sent in a SWAT team, guess what? A SWAT team was needed at the Conservation Authority because there's that many problems, and we have found more problems to deal with. And we're trying to deal with them one by one by one, and we're getting more things given to us to take care of. So it's a dog's breakfast. We're getting to them. And these committees that are meeting, we're moving as fast as we can, obviously thinking what's in the best interest of the NPCA and the taxpayers. So we're doing our job, and I would love to bring in someone right away, but I think we have some unfinished work to do. And having us there makes a lot of sense for the next few months. And if a councillor wants to step down tonight, they have every right to stand up and say, I want to step down, and we have to appoint someone temporarily until we get this in order. And I'm not prepared to step down tonight. Not that I want to be there, but there's a lot of unfinished work to do, and I'm prepared to be there for another few weeks, months, not years, months, until we deal with it.
Councillor Bilsma.
I think I said it all. The work is going, it's progressing quite well.
Thank you. Councillor Rigby has declined. Councillor Easton. She has relinquished her position. Councillor Bellows. I'm just looking at my screen here, and Councillor Campion. Sorry, Kiokio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not stepping down. What I wanted to do is, what I want to see, I want to see the individual from our community that were elected, went through the matrix system in Welland. I want to see that person on the NPCA, but if that person can't be there, saying that it's not fair to everybody else, then I will stay on. I just want to see, follow the motion that, well, the City of Welland had in regards to the NPCA.
Okay, I will go down the list. Thank you kindly. The next councillor on the list is Councillor Campion.
Appreciate council's comments, fully agree with them, and I would move to call a question.
Second. Call the question. Okay, we'll have to take a vote on calling the question at this point in time. All in favor of calling the question? Opposed? Then that is carried.
Call the question.
Is everyone fine with the time periods on this screen? Or the majority of people are fine with the time period on the screen? That's been agreed to by the mover. Are there? Okay. Then I guess I'm going to call a vote on this. So it was, as one been requested, recorded vote is requested.
Vote is open.
motion is carried. Point of clarification from Councillor Pettick.
Sorry, I should have spoke about it at the motion. It mentioned 3 months. What are the specific 3 months?
The 3 months that the clerk will tell us what she interprets as being the gist of the motion. Clerk?
Through you, Chair. So the current appointments expire on March 6th, so it would be 3 months from that point.
Okay, that's clarified. And the vote has taken place, so I guess we're moving on to our next item on the agenda, which is a letter from R.F. Powers, Chair, Niagara Escarpment Commission, respecting a request for appointment to the Niagara Escarpment Commission. I'll call on Councillor Junkin for the motion.
Moved by myself and seconded by my esteemed Councillor Butters that correspondence item CLC 12-2019 respecting the Niagara Escarpment Commission dated January 18th, 2018 be received, and that the process to recommend at least 3 regional councillors for the appointment to the Niagara Escarpment Commission Board commence at this time.
So I ask the question at this time, which regional councillors would be interested in having, we have to pass this first, okay. You see on the screen the correspondence item CLC 12-2019 being a letter from R.F. Powers, Chair, Niagara Escarpment Commission, dated January 18, 2018, be received for information that the process to recommend at least 3 regional councillors for appointment to Niagara Escarpment Commission Board commence at this time. All in favor of any discussion of this motion? All in favor? Okay, we're all in favor of that. Opposed? No one is opposed. The motion is carried. Now we'll ask who is interested in putting his or her name forward to be considered for appointment to the Escarpment Commission. And we have, okay, we have Councillor Gale.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to nominate Councillor Nicholson. If that's what you're looking for nominations, or if you're looking for people to just put up your hand, go ahead, Peter.
It can be either nominations or persons volunteering. So you've nominated him, so Councillor Nicholson's name is there. It's seconded. Other names? Councillor Zalepa?
Lord Mayor Sarah.
Okay. Seconder for that? Councillor Fedek? Another one, Councillor Kiokio? Seconder for Councillor Jordan? Councillor Ugolini? Any other names? Councillor Greenwood, do you have a name? You can either offer your own name or move a motion. In this case. Any others wishing to have their name put forward for consideration? Councillor Nicholson.
I'll move for Councillor Greenwood as well to be added.
Councillor Greenwood's name has been placed in nomination as well. Any others? Councillor Greenwood.
Yes, I'll nominate
Councillor
Councillor Whitby.
Witteveen? Okay. Any other nominations or volunteers? If not, I'll put the motion that Niagara Regional Council recommends Councillors Nicholson, DeZero, Jordan, Greenwood, Witteveen be considered by the Lieutenant Governor and Council for appointment to Niagara Escarpment Commission for a 4-year term. A mover and seconder for that particular motion. Okay, Councillor Steele will move it and Councillor Butters will second it. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. One of those individuals will be chosen by the lieutenant governor and council, which means the provincial cabinet will choose one of those four. All right, next will be (11.1.4) Committee of the Whole meeting schedule. I'd like to call on Councillor Villela for the motion.
Thank you, Chair. I have a resolution moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Kyokyo that the correspondence item CL-C13-2019 respecting the 2019 Committee of the Whole meeting schedule be received and that the 2019 Committee of the Whole meeting schedule be approved.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. The next one is 11.2.5, pregnancy and parental leave of members of council policy. I'm going to call on Councillor Nicholson for the motion.
Through you, Chair, I have a resolution moved by myself and Councillor Greenwood that the pregnancy and/or parental leave of members of council policy attached as Appendix 1 to report CLK 6-2019 be approved.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. The next item we have is 11.2.6, procedural bylaw amendment dash Appendix A, Code of Conduct for members of council. I'll call on Councillor Yip for the motion.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I have a resolution moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Greenwood that correspondence item CLC 14-2019 respecting procedural bylaw amendment Appendix A, Code of Conduct for members of council be received, and that Regional Council hereby approves the amendment to the Code of Conduct to include provisions related to the use of municipal property as indicated in CLC 14-2019.
Any discussion? Councillor Height.
There's three of the staff. Maybe the acting CAO wants to answer this question. Will this stop the abuse that took place last council with some councillors using our staff to prepare literature and print them?
I'll swivel my head and see who wishes to take that one on. I guess looks like the acting CAO.
Through you, Chair, it certainly is intended. It at least tightens everything up.
Perfect.
Fair.
Thank you.
Any other speakers? If not, I will call the motion. All in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. The next item we're dealing with is 11.2.7, recommendations for consideration from the Budget Review Committee of the Whole meeting held on February 28, 2019. I'll call on Councillor Zalepa for the motion.
So you've got me at a loss here. So is this the memorandum that I introduced for the, right? So,
yes.
So I'd so move, seconded by Councillor Bilzon. Sure. That the memorandum CLC 19-2019 be received. Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Clerk.
And the recommendations contained therein be approved. Let's see. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. The next item, item 12 and 12.1, the Budget Review Committee of the Whole. The minutes, Thursday, January 31, 2019. Call on Councillor Whalen for the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a resolution moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Greenwood, that the report BRCOTW 3-2019 being the open session minutes of the Budget Review Committee of the Whole, the meeting held on Thursday, January 31st, 2019, be received and the recommendations contained there be approved.
Any discussion? Councillor Rigby.
No, you missed me.
I missed you. Oh, did I miss you?
Yeah.
You're next. So I didn't miss you yet.
Okay.
I'll call on you, I promise, I'll call on you next.
All right.
This motion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Now, my good friend, Councillor Rigby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a motion, seconded by Councillor Bellows, that report AC 2019 being the open session minutes of the Audit Committee meeting held on Monday, February 4th, 2019, be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Next, I'll call on Councillor Zalepa for a motion. This is the Budget Review Committee of the Whole.
Thank you.
Thursday, February 14th.
Thank you,
Councillor
Mr. Chair.
Zalepa.
I have a motion moved by Councillor Easton that report BRC Committee of the Whole for 4/2019 being the open session minutes of the Budget Review Committee of the Whole meeting held on Thursday, February 14th, 2019 be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved.
Thank you. Any discussion? Councillor Encina.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to staff, is it this portion that the net was included that we had dealt with previously?
You talking about the Burgoyne Bridge net?
Yes. Was it not in this?
Yes, it is.
Was it part of this? Yes, it was part of this.
So my understanding then is if we approve this, we're saying, yes, let's do this.
That's correct.
CAO, yes.
And that's correct.
That's correct.
There's still an obligation to come back and report back to council on the details of it.
Right.
But we're going forward.
So I guess this is the last kick at the cat for myself. It is something that I think we should all be cognizant of. I know it is an emotional issue, has been an emotional issue, but I'm suggesting we step back, look at it as let's take the emotion out of it. Let's sit back, look at all the things around us and say, okay, it is one of many things in this region that for someone who wishes to perform an act like that, you can. But to single out one point and to contribute this much money towards it, rather than advance the money to the programs in itself, to mental health or everything else, I think is a travesty. Where do we stop? And I'm going to suggest to you, should something happen in the very near future somewhere else, is it going to come back here again? And we are going to set precedent if we do this. So I'm suggesting that it be removed and voted on as a separate item, or we amend it that if we can make an amendment, that we do that we vote on this separately.
Thank you. I have Councillor Senna. We're going to determine whether an amendment is possible in this case. Acting CAO.
So I believe it is possible. So to be clear, the questions put earlier, this is the ratification of the minutes that included the approval of the capital budget, including this particular project.
Yes.
The project referred to as infrastructure means protection.
Yes.
I believe it's the discretion of this council if they want to vote on that particular item separate from the others.
This is up to council. Yeah. So I asked council whether we can vote independently on this. I'll watch for nods. Maybe I'll just get the hands to go up. How many people would allow this to be extracted and voted on separately? Please raise your hands if you would.
On a point of order,
Okay,
Chair.
sorry, a point of order.
On a
Thank
point
you.
of order, if it's a motion and seconded, a show of hands isn't necessary. There's a motion on the floor now to remove it.
To separate, yeah.
So the motion is fine?
Ask for it to be removed.
Yep. To lift is fine, okay. I guess we will have a debate on whether we, on this motion, on the to lift. and it'll be Councillor Encina has spoken. Councillor Hyde is next.
Yes, I'm in full agreement with the councillor. Whether it's part of this budget that we're having issues with or part of next year's budget, I have great issues with this. And I don't want to single out Niagara Falls, but we know that it happens regularly, people jumping in Niagara Falls. It's not publicized. Fortunately, it's not publicized, but it's not publicized like Burgoyne Bridge. And as Councillor Encina and I have spoken about this, he was in the business, unfortunately, of seeing some of this go on a regular basis. Happily, I haven't, but in the last year, we've had someone drive up on Lake Street over top of the QEW, park their car and jump. We've had someone go on Burley, on our Skyway, park the car and jump. If someone left the hospital, and I don't want to suggest there was anywhere that should ever happen, but I'd rather see the money invested in helping people, more staff, phone calls, someone can answer a call and talk these people down. That's more important than to putting up a net somewhere or a mesh or a fence, because if they want to do it, unfortunately, they could, if someone left the hospital, they could go to the train tracks that are no barriers, wait for a train to come by, and step in front of a train. So there's no way of stopping this just by putting up a net. It's ludicrous. And if we put one up here, there are 7 bridges on the 406 from the QEW towards Glendale. Are you going to put them up on every bridge on every highway, and then 3 or 4 in the city of St. Catharines on the highway? It's unfortunately, I won't support spending the money on a net or a mesh or anything else. We need to help these people, and I'd rather invest the money helping them than putting up a structure that people can then move to another location.
Councillor Rigby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased that we've lifted this and we're having some further discussion on it. I was reading the minutes of the public health, and our medical chief, Dr. Hergege, indicated that, and I'm going to take this out of context, I think, but I was talking about putting video cameras and having a site perhaps close by to help people there. And I'd rather see that kind of thing, frankly, happening than Burgoyne Bridge has been, a structure's been there for 100 years plus, and it's only become a popular thing to publicize an event only recently, and because of the new facility and perhaps some of the bad news that people were thinking was going on with that bridge that attracted people. But frankly, people have been going off Burgoyne Bridge for a long time, and I can attest to that. But as Councillor Height has touched on, we have an awful lot of bridges and height structures within not just St. Catharines, but all of the Niagara, and we do know that there are people that are committing suicide or taking their lives in Niagara Falls, and wisely they're not publicizing it. And hopefully we can get a better structure built into our systems that allow people who have issues that they're despondent in such a way that they want to take their life, and that we can respond and look after them. We're not going to be able to get every one of them. And we know that the bridge in Toronto, that's always the one that's held up as an example. Well, no one's jumped off it. No, but they probably did something somewhere else. And I think the only positive about putting a structure in such a way to prevent people is perhaps over the 406, because now you're taking the life of someone else that's driving underneath it. But again, the 406 has been going underneath the Burgoyne Bridge for a long time, and it truly is unfortunate. And I'm more concerned about a net being put down and having to send our safety people, our firemen in there to try and extract someone who tried to commit suicide and got caught in the net. I'm quite concerned about that because they don't deserve to have to do that, but who do we call? It's the people who are having to respond to incidents that are going on. I think we're jumping too quickly, bad term. We're hopping onto that too quickly and trying to get something up there right away. Don't have a problem with getting some real numbers on what it would cost to do partial or part of it or something, but to go ahead and put the full budget in there this year, I think is not, it's not the way we should be going, and we should be looking at treatment instead. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You made reference, before I go to Bob, he made reference to Dr. Hergy. Perhaps we could clarify what you had said, Dr. Hergy, at the first time. Then I'll go to Councillor Gale.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to advise Council on the importance of the kind of language we use when discussing this topic. What we've seen, unfortunately, in St. Catharines around this piece of infrastructure we're talking about is what's called suicide contagion, whereby one individual unfortunately dies by suicide and other individuals start to follow that same pattern. And the biggest predictor of that happening is actually the kind of language that people use in terms of public discourse, and that fuels this cycle of contagion. And I want to make sure that the debate we have today at Council around this topic is one that doesn't unfortunately cause additional contagion to occur. So a few guidelines I may ask for members of Council is, first, if you could avoid speaking about specifics, that would be ideal. You've noticed I have not mentioned the name of the piece of infrastructure here. That's, intentional because I don't want to name that specific. Similarly, we don't want to talk about the specifics in terms of the means by which people are dying by suicide. Second, we don't want to ascribe intention or actions or control to people when they're going about activities. Words such as commit are sometimes used in describing this activity, and that's not language that's helpful. We want to use relatively passive language. The phrase died by suicide is the one I've been using, and that's a fairly widely accepted phrase. We want to avoid talking about individuals who've died by suicide somehow achieving a result or some kind of success, because we don't want to portray it that way at all. And as much as possible, if we can, recognize how complex this issue is, it's not simply a means of people are, despondent or, depressed, and that leads them to go, take such an action. It is much more complex than that. And lastly, we want to also highlight that there are other, options for people out there. Several members have talked about the option of getting treatment, and I think that's important to highlight. Treatment is very effective for people who do seek treatment and are able to follow through with that. And as much as possible, if we can mention those kinds of positives, that would be advisable. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Gale. Sorry, Councillor Rigby.
Just to apologize to the doctor. I am sorry if I used the wrong terminology for a real problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gale.
Thank you, Chair. And I was going to ask for Dr. Hergy because he did a fulsome report on this. And can you bring up the section of that report, please, the motion on it? Because I think part of your report, and correct me if I'm wrong, through you, Chair, to the doctor, was that you wanted to have more time to study on this and see how the trend went. I hope I'm not making this up, but
Mr. Chair, the councillor is correct. The recommendation I put forward is that we begin the work on planning for a barrier, but watch to see how things develop over the coming months to see if the cycle of contagion continues or if it may cease. Unfortunately, so far we are seeing the cycle of contagion is continuing.
So, Chair, first off, before I forget, I want to compliment Councillor Incentive for bringing this up, because this is a touchy item. I remember last term when we had ladies in here that lost their kids to opioids. Emotion took us over on everything, and we had to sit back and look at what's right here and that. And I think we handled it well. There's another one that emotion took over, so compliments to you, sir, for bringing this up, because I saw the nodding of heads thinking that maybe we are doing the right thing and listening to the doctor here on it. But, you've got the motion there. So, without reading the whole thing right now, is there a way of making this that we can delay it subject to a report? It's not a friendly amendment to it, so I'd like to we vote this down and then make a motion that we wait for Dr. Hergy's study to come back and to discuss it at that time for a report. And I think you said 2 or 3 months. Am I correct?
So, Mr. Chair, the councillor is correct. I had recommended in approximately 3 months that I would report back and say what had occurred. Of course, we are halfway through that 3-month period I initially proposed, and thus far we have not seen that cycle of contagion ceasing. I would also highlight a procedural matter which clerks may be able to elaborate on more fully, but the motion up here I don't believe is actually up for debate right now. That was passed by Public Health and Social Services Committee last month and then confirmed by Council. All that is up for debate is the budget for actually funding to implement that motion.
So Chair, through you to the CA, okay, I'll let the
Yeah,
CAO
no,
talk.
go ahead. Councillor Gale.
I'm looking, how do we solve this? You know our intentions on this, to delay this. My want is to, and I'll say it in a nice way, to defeat this, wait for a report from you in 3 months and see our options from there.
Yes.
Thank you.
Acting CAO in response to Councillor Gale.
Through you, Chair, I think I understand the intention of some councillors, although we'll deal with that. So the motion that's before you on the screen is not what's on the table. It's voting separately on the approval of a particular capital project. But if I understand Councillor Gale's request to see a way forward, I can make a suggestion on that front, and it's that the capital budget stay intact, but we can approve a motion that those funds not be initiated until that report comes back before council. I'm not sure that's exactly what Councillor Encina was looking for, but that would achieve what you've talked about.
I'm going to defer to Councillor Encina, Chair, if he agrees with me, because he's the one that brought this up and he deserves the credit on it.
Councillor Encina.
Thank you, Chair. I have no problem with that. Like I say, for the doctor to do his work, absolutely.
So Chair, is our motion then to change the motion, to amend the motion? Or are you saying to CAO, what do you wish?
They would do a motion about initiation, would they?
The clerk and the CAO are discussing.
I get it.
Through you, Chair, and I'll look to the clerk to actually put something before you to consider. We won't do anything with what was originally asked for by Councillor Encina, which was vote on that item. We'll put a proposed motion in front of you that is exactly what I said, that the project funds not be initiated until the report is forthcoming to council. Yep.
Chair, once again, I can't say enough how much guts it took for him to stand up and say that, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gale. Councillor Greenwood.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. I echo the comments of the previous speakers and agree that the money should be put into the health and wellness of those people suffering from mental illness. That $4 million is a lot of money. Thank you.
Councillor Bilsma.
And I appreciate, putting this off. I'm just kind of flabbergasted because we talk very freely about, factors that bring, and we recognize that despondency is not necessarily the only factor. There's confusion or delusion and if you just on your phone just do a quick Google search, the correlation connections between drug use and the challenges that we face, it just seems absolutely contrary to intuition and common sense that we would go forward and to those municipalities that voted to opt in. And you know where I'm going with this. I think that that's at the root of one of the challenges. If we really were serious about getting to the core of this social problem that we have, I think that we would take a very different approach to that debate. I know it's it's pot, but even cannabis, there is correlation and connection between the social challenge that we have before us and the startup and use of cannabis. And I think that it kind of opens up a second thing, but I think we have to give our heads a little bit of a shake when we deal with this in a fulsome, if we're really honest about dealing with this in a fulsome manner. That's through you, Chair, what we all should be coming to grips with.
Thank you. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My points were covered.
Any further speakers? If not, the clerk is putting on your screens the motion. That projects funds for transportation infrastructure means protection project be considered for initiation when the report respecting preventing deaths by suicide on public infrastructure be brought forward. Does that seem, we're getting nods? So I guess, any discussion? Councillor Height?
Will that motion, as you read it, be considered? It's sort of a done deal then.
No.
It should be reconsidered.
That's not what he's saying.
No, we'll get a
And this wasn't, is this the
response.
motion that Councillor Encina is bringing forward now? It's
Well, we'll
not
get-
the one he brought forward, and I second it.
Get a response from the CAO first and then Councillor Encina.
Through you, Chair, I guess the description that the councillor gave is not accurate. No, the process that we have there, when you approve the capital budget, there's a clear indication of those projects that are initiated, so they will commence. There's also a shorter list of projects that are to be initiated, and the work doesn't begin until that happens, and we bring a subsequent report to council. So this is correct in terms of that. That will be the gate in which the project would move forward.
Should it not be more clearly stated to be reconsidered for initiation when the report comes forward, and then the decision will be made yes or no? We haven't approved this. We're approving the money be put aside, but we aren't approving the project. So should the project be reconsidered when we see the report and make our determination whether we're going to invest $4 million in helping people or $4 million putting up netting? I'm in favor of helping people, not netting.
So,
sorry.
So through your chair, no, reconsidered is not appropriate. The project is not initiated unless directed by council, so that's what they would consider through this report. And just a clarification to the comments made, the means protection project is part of capital. If we were to choose to invest in the root cause, it would be operating funds.
Chair, now I don't have either of these motions up to speak to, but my recollection is that the larger resolution that we had passed some time ago didn't actually approve the construction. What it said is we would consider that after the report was received. So if we could just flash up what it is we're voting on right now. I've got a suggestion. I'll try to get my thoughts telepathically over.
I'll help.
I will.
Through you, Chair, if I could, so we could bring up the motion, the amended motion that was actually carried, but it was silent. And I think it was intentional. The project was to proceed, but there would be a report back. So it was implied that it would proceed. We could verify that, but I guess we'll deal with what's on the floor at the moment.
It wasn't all that clearly worded either, but it clearly called for a report for this council to consider before the project would proceed.
Through you, Chair, in speaking to the person that moved the amendment, that was not the intention, but I wouldn't argue it one way or the other.
Just going by what I recall. May I sit until that happens?
No, stand like a bad boy.
With my face in the corner.
Thank you.
So through you, Chair, just for clarity, and apologize to council, we're trying to make this work on the fly. The bold piece in number 2 has been added to the original recommendation, most appropriate way to effect the change that has been put forward by Councillor Encina.
So the meaning of this would be that the money that's allocated in the budget remain in the budget, but nothing be done until council approves the project. I think that's fine.
Chair, how much does that hurt us to keep that in the budget now for it? No, why do we have it in the budget? Why don't we make that decision 3 months from now? I'd just like an answer to that.
Okay, CAO?
Through you, Chair, it's in the budget because we were directed by council to put it in the budget. It doesn't necessarily hurt anything. It won't change.
Would it help us with our budget
tax.
to take that out and make that decision after that report?
If I understand the question correctly, removing this project will not change our tax increase for 2019.
Okay, I don't understand that, but I understand your answer. I just don't understand why that wouldn't help us to take that money, put it back in to the coffers or whatever, and if we need it in 3 or 4 months, if we have a report that way, just like any other emergency situation, we use it then. I thought it would help our budget to put that. No? Okay.
Councillor Diodati, I see, is on the list. Councillor Diodati.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like to see the money left in there anyway because we do have a problem. We just debate how to deal with the problem. So some people like Annette, some don't, and I'm not going to talk about all the places, but yeah, there's a lot of places if you choose to take this path. I'd rather see somebody permanently be stationed on the Burgoyne Bridge, and it'd still be cheaper to have somebody permanently walking up and down giving counseling, at least a real person. So I'd rather, until we come to a solution with Dr. Hergy or an idea on how we can better address the problem and the solution, I'd like to just leave that money for now. It shows our commitment, I think, to a very real problem that we're dealing with in our community.
Thank you. And Councillor Dart.
I'm good with the way it's going to be. Referring to Councillor Gale, leave it in the budget because we're going to use it one way or the other anyways.
Councillor Villela.
Sorry. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Just a question, just to clarify. If the $4 million is left in the budget and we decide not to go forward with the netting, are we on the right track in believing that we could allocate that money to frontline services, to assisting, or is it going to stay in the capital budget and we're not going to see it for the purposes that we think we're going to see it for?
CAO.
Through you, Chair, the funding that was identified for this project is capital reserve. If the project doesn't go forward, it go back to the capital reserve. The idea of dealing with the root cause would be an operating budget consideration, but we will bring that forward to council for consideration.
Thank you. We now have the motion before us on the screen. And any further discussion? If you look carefully at it, that we have a recorded vote has been requested when we vote. And we will have the vote. It's a recorded vote. The clarification.
I'm sorry, but I just
before he starts. Okay, go ahead.
So as this reads, the item would still be in the budget, but a decision backed by this council. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So get ready for the vote to be opened.
Vote is open.
The motion has been carried. Okay. Now I'll call the vote on the balance of the recommendations. Okay, the vote on the balance of the recommendations. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next, we have the Public Works Committee minutes we're dealing with. I'm calling on Councillor Edgar.
I'm fooling you.
Edgar for the motion.
Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Foster. The report PWC 2-2019, being the open and closed session minutes of the Public Works Committee meeting held on Tuesday, February 19th, 2019, be received, and the recommendations contained therein be approved.
Any discussion? Councillor Gale?
Thank you, Chair. I was told last term that if I declare a conflict, as I have a conflict on the Martindale Road portion, 2018 T101, if I declared a conflict on the day of corporate services when this was made up, I don't have to bring it up again. Is that correct?
Clerk?
Or do I have to keep declaring a conflict every time it comes up?
Through you, Chair, I would suggest that you declare each time you have a conflict.
Okay, again, I have a conflict, I said. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gale. Councillor Redekop?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are in these minutes 4 construction projects where the budget has been increased. One I understand maybe before the commencement of construction. Since I'm not on the Public Works Committee, was the issue addressed as to how this is going to be addressed going forward so that we don't have this continuous alteration in budgets to deal with these projects?
CAO?
Through you, Chair, there was a fair bit of discussion at committee, and there were different circumstances for each of them. And there was a commitment made that we're going to be bringing back a report speaking to exactly that to the committee in terms of where we are, where we're headed, and progress made.
Thank you, Chair, because my recollection is that we've hired people to deal with this type of issue, have we not?
Through you, Chair, yes. That report is going to speak to globally how we fare in terms of increases in budgets, but also talk about the improvements we've made in both project management, asset management in those areas. Correct.
So we can expect to see real improvement over the next few months.
That's correct.
Councillor Furtick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to defer the PW 14-2019, which talks about decreasing the speed limit on Regional Road 12. I'd like to move that be lifted and deferred at this time for reasons of when I found out about it. I went back to council and there was nobody on council, including the mayor, that we did not know that this was had come to the region. So luckily I spotted it and I've had some discussion. There is some better things and more things, I believe. And not only that, the regional council has agreed to come to our public works meeting and explain the situation much better than.
You have a seconder for that? Councillor Vidovine. Any discussion? Oh, no discussion on this, thank you. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Now we're going to vote on the balance of it. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next will be 12.5, Public Health and Social Services Committee. I'm calling on Councillor Junkin for the motion. It's going to be Councillor Keokil, actually.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I just read the script.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a resolution moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Villala. The report PHSSC 2-2019 being the open session minutes of the Public Health and Social Services Committee meeting held on Tuesday, February 19, 2019, be received and the recommendation contained therein be approved.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. I would now be asking if there's a councillor interested in sitting on the Niagara Region Emergency Management Program Committee. And I would ask for a mover and seconder for the appointment motion. That comes from the minutes. Is there a councillor who's interested and wishes to wish to nominate somebody? Councillor Dart?
I would nominate Councillor Vincent.
We have a seconder. Councillor Bellows? Anyone else? Councillor Rigby?
I move the nominations be closed.
All in favor of that motion? Okay. Then we will vote on this. The Regional Council appoint Councillor Encina as representative of the Niagara Region Emergency Management Program Committee. All in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Next is the Corporate Services Committee. I'm calling on Councillor Foster for the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a resolution moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Ip that report CSC 2-2019 being the open session minutes of the Corporate Services Committee meeting held on Wednesday, February the 20th, 2019, be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved. I just wanted to make a quick comment that, as we all know, the NRPS Station 1 was one of the key items that we dealt with within this and the awarding of that particular contract. Thank you.
Discussion? If not, all in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Next is the Planning and Economic Development Committee. We'll call on Councillor Houston for the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a resolution moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Yip, that report PEDC 2-2019, being the open session minutes of the Planning and Economic Development Committee held on Wednesday, February 20th, 2019, be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved.
Any discussion? Councillor Zalepa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to lift an item, if I could, just for a comment and a question. Section 6.3 PDS 10/22/19. It's the update on the Natural Environment Work Program with regards to the official plan. And I understand that there's a key issue that's going to be addressed there in that mapping issues. And why I wanted to raise it and even raise a question is because, as you know, we have tender fruit land throughout the Niagara Peninsula, but in Niagara Lake we have a concentration of small farms. Most of our farm parcels are, less than 10 acres, in the 10 to 12 acre range. It's very small. And the mapping is a challenge for us for farmers in our community, because some of the mapping is not accurate. So I guess really my question is some of this mapping inaccuracy going to get worked through? And that's for the planning department. I did send a note to planning earlier this week around a certain specific item. But this is really important for farmers in Niagara Lake, because you can imagine if you have a 12-acre farm and you have a drain running through it, all of a sudden now you've got maybe 60 meters on each side you can't do anything with regards to putting up an outbuilding or anything like that. And if the farm's only so big, there's nothing left. So it's a big issue, and I just want to know that, is this going to get addressed in this as we work through this update?
Yes, thank you for the question. Through the chair, this issue is going to be addressed. Mapping was one of the main issues that was identified when we started putting the context of the background reports together. Since then, there have been a couple of technical advisory committee meetings specifically looking at dealing with mapping. And as a result of that, there's going to be a discussion paper that comes forward that's going to recommend how we deal with the mapping in the future. Yes.
I could just follow up, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I'm encouraged to hear that. Thank you very much for that. And I can only assume then that the local agricultural committee subcommittee will be part of that conversation, and hopefully that's the case.
Yes, we will be involving the agricultural industry in discussions on mapping. Right now, it's basically dealing with the committee that deals with natural heritage, the technical advisory committee, but there is going to be discussion with the agricultural committee too when that's established.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other discussion? If not, I'll put the motion before you. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. The Chief Administrative Officer, you have no reports, I understand? No Chief Administrative Officer's report, so motions. There are no motions that I'm aware of. Are there any notices of motion? Councillor Greenwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. I'd like to advise council that I will be bringing a motion forward at the next council meeting to consider the 2019 legislative schedule of regular meetings to change the meeting time from Public Health and Social Services Committee from 1 till 2 p.m. on Tuesdays.
So that's a notice of motion. So we also have, is there any other business? This is limited to announcements. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I know it's been a long day, but I'd like to highlight a good news item in our community.
Always happy to hear that, Councillor.
I attended a dinner a few weeks ago. It was called Love on the Brain, and it was a fundraising event which was organized by a young and upcoming leader in our community, a girl named Brittany Ritchie. And Brittany had reached out to the Alzheimer's Society last year sometime, wanting to put it on this event. And as part of the event, she printed out flyers and tickets, arranged for a nutritionist to come speak, a silent auction, there were gifts, and a 3-course meal at Paris Aux Crepes on Queen Street, Niagara Falls. And it was a great event. All the net proceeds went to the Alzheimer's Society. And it was a great event. It certainly highlighted the need and the fact that dementia, really doesn't discriminate. I believe the last figure I read was that in the Niagara region, there's over 10,000 people that are suffering some progressive form of dementia, and this number continues to grow. The event highlighted the importance for all of us really to work together and to do our part. And certainly Brittany Ritchie, by putting on this event and organizing it, she certainly did her part. So I just wanted to give her some recognition to advise council of that, and the fact that I'll be giving her a certificate of thanks for her leadership that she took on this particular matter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I also have some happy thoughts in Niagara. Last night, despite the weather, it was terrible driving. It took me almost an hour to get to Port Robinson, but Councillor Baalsma, Councillor Hewson, and Councillor Foster, we were able to plow through the snow and come from where we live to go to Club Castropignano for the annual awards ceremony, honoring all the volunteers at the Conservation Authority. It was really a happy event, and learned a lot about the Conservation Authority. And this one lady raises monarch butterflies now, so save all your milkweed, don't chop it down. It was really very insightful, and it was a great evening. We had a great time, got home safely. And also on the 21st of February, I had the opportunity to go to Alpha, the Alpha conference, not a conference, but it was a day session up in Toronto. Oh, Alpha is the Association of Local Public Health Agencies. And once a year, there is a convention or a conference in Toronto in June. And in February, they have a day event that you go up there. And we discussed a lot of things, a lot of medical officers of health, including Dr. Hergy and Dr. Feller, and discussing all the issues that are going on in the province right now with respect to the change in government and the different legislation that's coming down and how we're going to handle that. And it was very insightful, and I look forward to going back to the next one.
Thank you, Councillor. Nice to hear 2 good news reports from councillors. Thank you. There are no reports from, oh, I see a couple more have come up. Lots of good news coming. Councillor Edgar.
Exactly, Chair. Thank you very much for recognizing me. And I was inspired by previous two councillors, Councillor Nicholson and Councillor Greenwood, with their good news stories, and I wanted to bring another good news story in front of council, and that is that my friend Jim Diodati, Councillor Diodati, has come to the light side, the side of light and goodness, and has decided to quit fooling people, and he shaved his head, and I love his haircut.
We're all delighted, by the way, to have Councillor Diodati with us as those of you in the past who've had the opportunity to have him sitting around the table, it's great to see him back, and we wish him well. And he's looking much better than he did a few months ago, and he's bouncing back. He says he's full of vim, vigor, and vitality. Jim, good to have you back. Councillor Height.
Yes, I'm not going to go to the same barber. Sorry, guys. On another good note. Tomorrow downtown St. Catharines from 11 to 2 is a chili cook-off.
Oh.
Funds raised from the chili cook-off go to community care, St. Catharines Thorold, that help the homeless, the people in need in our community. And I'm not sure what the tickets are, but they're reasonable. So I know that Thorold will be there. St. Catharines, some of St. Catharines reps will probably be there. And it's the chili, I think there's 11 or 12 participating organizations, groups, anything from Niagara Real Estate doing theirs. I know that the Superstore has theirs. I know some of the restaurants downtown, St. Catharines have them. I don't know if they give out the recipes, but the food is marvelous. And if you can eat 11 samples of chili, you're a better person than me.
Well, thank you. That's a great invitation. I've attended that in the past, and it is a wonderful event to attend. You have to book off time in the afternoon, however. I won't say why. There are no reports from closed session, so I'm now going to call on Councillor Gibson for a motion on bylaws. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a resolution moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Dart. Resolution is that the bills 2019-16 to 2019-30 be now read and do pass. Thank you.
The first is we has to be voted on separately. So the bill 2019-16, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. And then the balance of the bylaws. Yes, oh, sorry. Councillor Ferdick.
Bylaw, sorry, 20.7, which is Bill 2019, is in reference to the deferred lifted.
You're correct.
So I don't know what you do with that. So what do you
Through
lift
you,
it as
Chair,
well?
it's been removed from the list. You'll notice it was
Did you
Bill
lift-
2019-22. We've removed it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Rigby, you had your name on the screen.
I was going to mention the entrepreneurial night tomorrow night, in which you recognized Councillor Dart, but he's not the only one being honored. And looking forward to a wonderful night of celebration of people who have given so much to this peninsula and the region of Niagara.
Oh, great. It's unfortunate that some of us will not be, we will be representing you in Red Deer, Alberta, where I think it's 27 below zero, I'm told, for the people. Yeah.
Who's counting?
Thank you. Okay, calling the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
That's it.
And I look down the list and say, we look like we are adjourned, and I don't, being no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much. Councillor Yip is looking at something here. What's
Councillor Edgar's birthday yesterday and sends it today.
I'm told it's Councillor Edgar's birthday yesterday and Councillor Senzik today. Just for your news.